What's up, guys? In today's Fan Friday, we're going to talk about the most optimal rep ranges for muscle growth. This Fan Friday's question was the best rep range to grow the hams. And I want to take this question and expound upon it and not just talk about a single muscle group, but the entire body. So let's get into it. In today's video, I wanted to talk about two studies that were done by Brad Schoenfeld and colleagues in 2014 and 2015 respectively, so let's get into those. The study in 2014 involved two groups. One group performed 2 to 4 rep ranges, while the other group performed 8 to 12 rep ranges. So those are the two groups, and after the study was done, when everything was equated, what they found out was that muscle growth for each of the two groups was relatively the same, and that may surprise a lot of people. One thing that I do have to note though, and this kind of makes sense to anyone who's been around weightlifting a while, was that of course the group that was doing the 2 to 4 rep ranges, their strength was superior compared to the one that was doing 8 to 12. So obviously if we're strength training, we want to focus on a little bit lower of the rep range. If we want to focus on pure muscle growth, then we could easily do the 8 to 12 rep range. But let's check out the other study that was done the previous year. Now in this study, they went to the opposite end of the extreme. Instead of 2 to 4 reps, this time they went to 25 to 35 repetitions, comparing that once again to the 8 to 12 rep range. So this is what they found. They found that everything equated, being the training intensity was equated, meaning that they roughly trained to failure every single time, because it's hard to judge a study if you just give someone a weight and say do 25 to 35 reps of these. That weight's going to be pretty light, right? So they could easily just blow through the motions on it and not get the same amount of effort that they might put into a set of 8 to 12. So when everything's equated, when intensity level is equated over the sets, they found out that hypertrophy growth was exactly the same, or very similar, or statistically insignificant, to put it in technical terms. So what does this mean for us looking at both of these studies when it comes to muscle growth? Well, we know that if we're doing sets of 25 to 35, that equates roughly to sets of 8 to 12. And then those sets of 8 to 12, once again, roughly compared to sets of 2 to 4. Now, what does this mean? Should you be doing all those rep ranges all the time? Well, no. In my opinion, what you should stick towards is really sets of 6 to 15, somewhere in there. Now, my personal note on top of all of this is that my personal style of training, my meat and potatoes, if you will, involves pretty much everything from 8 to 20. So I personally prefer the little higher volume sets. Why I prefer the higher volume sets is because I've noticed in the past that if I train in the lower rep ranges, my body just can't handle it. My joints start to ache and I can't perform on a daily basis. So if you're out there and you feel like the heavy loads just aren't for you, that's quite all right. You don't necessarily have to do them. As bodybuilders, we don't necessarily have to do anything. There's no movement we have to do. There's no rep ranges that we have to train in. Now, on the other hand, if you don't like to train in the super high rep sets that I do, for instance, the 25 to 30 plus sets that I sometimes do, you don't have to do those. You could definitely go on the lower end and you could stick to the 6 to 8 or the 5 to 8, whatever you're comfortable with. You just have to make sure that your volume's equated and then your intensity is equated over those sets. So to wrap this up, there's not really any set rep range that's going to be the absolute best for muscle growth. I would encourage you guys to have your meat and potatoes somewhere between, the 8 and 15 for most of your work. Like I said, I go to the opposite end of that spectrum. Some people might go to the other. They may go to the, 4 to 10 range, and that's their meat and potatoes if they like to do the little bit lower reps. But when everything's equated, if you have your intensity equated, if you have your volume equated, then the most important thing for muscle growth is going to be consistency. And that's the last thing that I wanted to touch on, because I think, once again, this is something that is definitely overlooked. It's when you want to grow a particular muscle group, if you want to grow a body part, if you want to bring it up, there's going to have to be a lot of time and effort put into it. I've been working on my chest for years, and it's still not been brought up. So, you have to first look at things like, proper form. You have to look at your frequency and those things first, and then you could get into the rep ranges and things like that. So always keep that in the back of your minds, that if those things are set, then you could start getting into your frequency and your rep ranges and all that. So guys, there's no magical rep range from muscle growth. Yes, I wouldn't encourage you guys to lift, 30 plus or 50 plus, like that's kind of exorbitant. But anywhere, really, I would recommend anywhere between 4 and 30, 4 and 25, somewhere in there. So that's the rep ranges for proper muscle hypertrophy. As always, guys, keep dominating every aspect. I'll see you soon.